New Kids on the Block. And the heat is on in Neighbors. Weeknights at 7 on 10.
CNN Headline News, I'm Brian Nelson. An historic first in the Soviet Union as the Republic of Georgia directly elects a leader. Thousands of Georgians go to the polls today to choose a new president, and the front-running candidate promises to make a break from the Kremlin. Zviad Gamzaguriya is Georgia's acting president, and he is guiding the republic now toward its declared independence. Georgia was not among the 9 republics to sign a treaty to preserve the Soviet Union. Russian leader Boris Yeltsin announced that accord yesterday after a meeting with Soviet leader Gorbachev. The accord would give the republics greater control of commerce and would change the country's name to the Union of Soviet Sovereign Republics. The treaty must still be approved by the republic's legislatures. The last Cuban troops to pull out of Angola are now back home in Havana. The commander of what once was a 50,000-man force said on arrival last night in Havana that the mission is complete. The withdrawal was brokered by the United Nations in 1988. It used to be that young Cubans studied in the Soviet Union to reinforce their communist beliefs, but Jill Doherty reports one Cuban's trip to Moscow made him more of a capitalist.
Only 90 miles separate the island of Cuba from the United States. Some Cuban refugees cross that dangerous divide in hours or in days. For Gustavo Mendez, the journey was thousands of miles and lasted 5 years. It began when he left Cuba for the Soviet Union, where he had his political awakening. Things I couldn't see in Cuba, I saw in the Soviet Union, he says, in Russian, still easier for him than English. A lot of things, how people live, freedom, you can talk freely, you can think freely. Gustavo spent 5 years in Riga, Latvia, at the Institute for Civil Aviation Engineering. I was afraid of the Cuban government, he says, not the Russians. Russians can say anything they want. The students organized a strike across from my institute. I couldn't believe it. They had journalists there, television. There was never anything like that in Cuba, and never will be as long as Fidel is there. Gustavo's father has been in the U.S. for 12 years. He escaped from Cuba in the Mariel boat lift. But he never lost touch with his son. And last year they met in Moscow to plan Gustavo's escape to the U.S. I left Miami to go to, as they say, the mouth of the wolf. I had a lot of fear, but after 11 years of not seeing him, we hugged for 10 minutes. I couldn't believe I was there. Last fall, at a refueling stopover in Gander, Newfoundland, on his way back to Cuba, Gustavo walked up to a Canadian policeman and said he wanted to defect. Political and economic changes in the Soviet Union led to a political awakening for Gustavo Mendez. They're also having an effect on those still in Cuba. But some observers don't expect any immediate changes there.
There was a euphoria and some hope when changes and reform swept through Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union and even Nicaragua. I think there was hope among Cubans that maybe change and reform could come there quickly. Castro has sent a different message. His message is socialism or death.
The 5 years that Gustavo Mendez spent in the Soviet Union meant 5 more years of separation from the father he loves. But he says he's grateful for his introduction to freedom in the USSR. Now, he says, there are fewer Cuban students there. Castro, he says, doesn't want them to go. They come back with too many ideas. Jill Doherty for CNN, Miami.
An Indian newspaper says that a 4th woman may have been involved in the assassination of former Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. A confiscated videotape reportedly shows a woman handing him flowers just seconds before an explosion took place. The bomb that killed Gandhi and 17 others did so instantly. So far, the investigation has focused on one of 3 women around the former premier at the time of the blast. In an effort to regain public confidence, South Korean President Roh Tae-woo today made some major changes to his cabinet. The Justice and Finance Ministers were among the 4 cabinet members replaced. South Korea has been rocked by violent anti-government protests for the past month. Libya is reportedly shipping arms and equipment to Iraq in direct violation of United Nations embargoes against Baghdad. U.S. News & World Report claims that Libya is airlifting equipment like howitzers and military vehicles to Jordan and Iran. These supplies are then reportedly transported in trucks to Baghdad. The U.S. Defense Department has not commented on the report. The United Nations is appealing for a ceasefire in Ethiopia as the rebels push closer and closer to the capital. Government negotiators are on their way to London for tomorrow's scheduled peace talks. There are reports that the country's last major seaport has been captured by the rebels. Most of Ethiopia's exports and imports run through Assab, including food. UN Secretary General Javier Perez de Cuellar says that a halt in the fighting will help to reach a negotiated settlement. Among those fleeing the Ethiopian capital were thousands of Ethiopian Jews. Israel carried out the airlift to Tel Aviv over 2 days under the codename Operation Solomon. Israeli officials say that Ethiopia's ousted ruler had originally demanded weapons for the release of the Jews, but Israel repeatedly refused. Some 15,000 Jews eventually made it out during the airlift, and President Bush said he was moved by the exodus after the U.S. helped to arrange it.
I had 2 calls today from American Jewish leaders in the Jewish community in America, and both just very touched by what's happened. So it's a marvelous thing. I was told by one of them that in the Exodus, 10 babies were born in the plains. You better check that out, but that's something.
John Sununu's days as White House Chief of Staff are not numbered. That, according to an angry President Bush, who sharply denied reports yesterday that he might be thinking of getting rid of Sununu. An article in U.S. News & World Report claims that Sununu is going to be demoted because of the recent flap about his personal use of military aircraft. The president's comments came as he was vacationing at his summer home in Maine for the holiday weekend. The president is trying to regain his strength, which has been sapped by an overactive thyroid condition. Francis Harden explains.
George Bush was roaring along the Maine coast on the first full day of the Memorial Day weekend. But when they stopped to fish, apparently neither the president nor Mrs. Bush had any luck. Next, it was off to the golf course for 18 holes, the first time the president's played since his thyroid condition was diagnosed nearly 3 weeks ago. The forced inactivity may have affected his normally fast-paced game.
Yeah, I just feel a little awkward. I'm not blaming the thyroid.
Oh, God.
No. Stinks. How many do we get to hit off here?
What's the use of being president if you can't hit till you're happy? As he waited for the rest of his party to tee off, Mr. Bush enforced what he calls the golf rule. That is, no questions from reporters.
It's good to be on holiday, Mr. President.
Hard luck, Ken. Here's what you're doing wrong.
Despite the golf game and the earlier boating, Mr. Bush is still not up to full speed. He hasn't returned to jogging, for example. And since his condition was diagnosed, the president has dropped 13 pounds. He doesn't want to gain it back, even though his doctors think he should. An outside specialist says exercising now is okay, but not dieting.
If he's failing to take in sufficient calories with this inefficient engine that he has with the hyperthyroidism, certainly he will feel far more fatigued than he would if he got inadequate calories. So in that sense, it's not the right time to diet. He may want to stay exactly where he is, but that's weight maintenance.
Part of the Bush's Kennebunkport tradition is to step out to one of their favorite local restaurants. But because the president likes his new silhouette, he may be pushing